My favourite thing that happens over the course of this week is that I get ignored increasingly. So on the first day, people are very polite and they're very much like, yeah, listen to what Dominic has to say. And then round about Wednesday, I can be doing this for about 10 minutes. It's like at the wedding, I need the glass or something to, yeah? Because people get excited by the things that they're listening to. They get excited by other people. That's the whole point of this. And for the next bit, that's what we're going to do. I'm going to introduce all of you to join me on the front row. We have a tiny stage and we have the cast of thousands this evening. So there's going to be a bit of mechanics, but if you'd like to come up and join me. So, from my left, we have Anusha Yasoda-Mohan, who is an Atlantic Fellow for Equity and Brain Health, Research Fellow here at Trinity College. We have Rachel Hoare, and Rachel is a Trinity Research in Childhood Centre. The reason I'm reading my notes is that everybody has those great academic titles, which have those ones, yeah, there are loads of bits. We have Mei-Lin, hello, who is Ambassador Liaison Officer in the Trinity Centre for Ageing and Intellectual Disability. Next to her, we have Eimear McGlinchy, neurologist, Assistant Professor of Intellectual Disability. It's tiny writing. This is why Monday night happens, so that on Tuesday I can correct all of this. I told you it wasn't television. Where are we going? Yeah, we have Eimear McGlinchy. We have Kirti Ranchod, who's co-founder and chair of the African Brain Health Network and also a neurologist. And when I said we were going to do this and talk to everybody, I said, you've got like 3 minutes. And 3 minutes is like an introduction with those kind of titles. So can we just play? So what we're going to do is this. I'm going to give people a microphone, and then they're going to talk about what they've been doing and what's been happening since we met and encountered people last year. And the answer is quite a lot. But what we're going to do to start with is just show a quick little video which relates to Anusha's work.
What we're doing here today is trying to put some poetry, some music, some realism into what tinnitus means to people like myself, and to give other people a kind of understanding and an awareness of what tinnitus really is for people who live with it every minute, every hour of every day.
You can't explain the continuous effects. Just it wears you down. Wears you down because you don't have it. There's no sign of an ending to it.
So with the song, we started out getting everybody's experiences with it.
I've never done anything like that before. It's completely new, and it was absolutely amazing to see.
It's an amazing thing.
The stories that we've heard today informs ways in which we can actually develop coping strategies. There's only so much that you can learn in the lab, and you got to go out there. You got to be with them. You have to be in it fully.
Once tinnitus is really out there, we hope that may even be enough in itself to get people's attention. That's a job well done.
I don't necessarily need a mic, but I guess there it is. Thank you very much. I think I've started my timer because I knew Dominic said, well, we'll be ringing a bell if you go over 3 minutes. So I have a timer going. So what you've seen right now, how many of you have heard about tinnitus? Hands up. So most of us have heard about tinnitus. They're about 10% of each country's population. So that's a lot of people suffering from a continuous ringing in the ear based on the size of the population of the country. So what we did in Ireland was bring together different people. So there are people with tinnitus. There are people who work with people with tinnitus, like myself. And there are also artists who, in the music industry, are exposed to a lot of tinnitus. There's a lot of stigma about tinnitus in the music industry that people don't want to talk about. So what we did is we brought all of these community champions and researchers and people living with tinnitus together to write a song about their lived experience of tinnitus. So this is the first time in Ireland that we're doing something like this for the tinnitus community. And what we saw was this radical collaboration, which is such an interesting and such, it is at the heart of Creative Brain Week and of GBHI. And as an Atlantic Fellow, this is something that was drilled into me in the 1 year that I've been a fellow and the several years that I've worked with GBHI and Creative Brain Week. So when I came to Creative Brain Week, I met Dominic, and I also met the person who helped curate this event, Professor Nick Johnson, with who we are together now writing a paper on whether this can become an intervention, a creative intervention strategy for people living with tinnitus. And maybe this is a creative intervention strategy for other people who want to talk about what they're going through, intrusive emotions, intrusive feelings that they're going through, but producing a creative output. And who knows, maybe there's something out there that we don't know, and something that radical collaboration as something like this can teach us about in the future. Thank you. My time is up.
Hi, everybody. As Dominic said, my name is Dr. Can everyone hear me at the back? And online, brilliant. I'm a lecturer in the School of Languages, Literatures and Cultures. And I'm also the director of the Research Centre in Trinity for Forced Migration Studies. And I'm also a clinician. I'm an expressive arts psychotherapist, and I work with unaccompanied minors coming into the country, so children under the age of 18 who are in the care of TUSLA, who aren't in the care of an adult. So I work through the expressive arts. And actually a lot of what Ian said resonated with me, because curiosity, engagement, all of those things, the things that I use in the work with these young people. So I suppose, as you all know, I'm sure, the expressive arts really harnesses the power of art, music, drama, movement, dance, to engage the brain in unique ways. And this activates multiple sensory, emotional, and cognitive processes simultaneously. And we think of the expressive arts in those terms, but I also work through any way in which I can be creative. So sometimes that involves working through football, working through cricket, working through the metaphor of sport, because that's how I engage with the young people I'm working with. And this multimodal approach really promotes integration across brain regions, fosters neuroplasticity, and enhances emotional regulation, self-awareness, and creative problem-solving skills. It also requires far less language than traditional talking therapy, which for those in the process of learning the language of the host country and whose capacity for language may be reduced because of after a traumatic experience, is highly beneficial. I first spoke about my work at Creative Brain Week 2 years ago, and lots of things have happened since then. So at that Creative Brain Week, I met two of the Atlantic Fellows, Dr. Tala Al-Rusan from the University of California in San Diego. Hi, Tala, if you're listening in. And Dr. Ganza Zihindullah, Research Fellow in the Center for Global Health in Trinity. Both academics and practitioners working in this area of forced migration studies. And together with Professor Teresa Betancourt from Boston, they both then spoke at the launch of the Trinity Research Center for Forced Migration Studies. The primary goal of the centre is to promote and enhance the inter- and multidisciplinary study of factors determining and resulting from the forced migration of populations, and drawing on the research of lots of colleagues, different colleagues from different areas in Trinity, and scholars and practitioners nationally and internationally. And these connections made in Creative Brain Week led to the formalization of a partnership between Boston College and TCD, and the organization of this upcoming symposium, which you can see the details behind you, entitled Building Systems for Mental Health and Psychosocial Support for Forcibly Displaced Populations. And there'll be lots of information about that going around in the coming weeks. For me, one of the greatest privileges of engaging with colleagues during CBW was a collaboration between myself and Dr. Ganza, where together we wrote his harrowing story of forced displacement through a trauma and neuroscience lens. It was truly inspiring to witness and document Ganza's story for a book which brought together the lived experiences and insights shared by a number of contributors to Trinity, to Creative Brain Week. So just finally then, a quick update on the University of Sanctuary activities in Trinity College. Trinity was designated a University of Sanctuary in 2021. And that committed college to creating a culture of welcome and inclusion for all those seeking sanctuary. Trinity now has a fantastic sanctuary support officer, Lázaro Rodrigo, We currently have 11 undergraduate students on sanctuary scholarships, which provide tuition fees, a monthly stipend, and tailored support services for 4 years to students in the Irish International Protection System. We also have one fully funded PhD scholarship, which is about to be advertised. We're really excited about this. Obviously, we want more scholarships for both undergraduates and postgraduates, but we're making a great start. And finally, I promise it's finally, we also set up conversation classes for refugees, myself and my colleague Brona Chatabusik, in the summer of 2022. So we've been running for nearly 2 years now. These classes are volunteer-led and provide opportunities for refugees to come into Trinity and have conversations with staff and students. The students get at least as much out of it as the refugees do. We're always looking for volunteers, so please get in touch if you're interested. Thank you.
So, Maylin, can you tell us about what has happened in the last year since Creative Brain Week in third level education for people with intellectual disability?
So there's a lot has happened over the last year. So, for example, Simon Harris has got funding recently for 10 new courses for people with intellectual disabilities for third level education in Ireland.
Amazing, it's really good news.
Yeah, it's amazing news that more opportunities are given for people with intellectual disabilities to gain more opportunities to third level education and for employment as well.
Yeah, and because you went to Trinity College Dublin in TCPID, and can you tell me about your experiences? What supports did you think were important for you?
Well, I think the supports that I needed when I first came to Trinity was around social opportunities. So like mentorships and like buddy systems and things like that.
So the social support bit was really important. And what about the other kind of social aspects within college? So were there any societies that you joined or anything that was important there?
Yes, so I joined the trampoline club here in Trinity, and that was interesting for me because I felt like an outsider compared to everyone else. It was very different dynamic between the two, myself and then them, because as you know, a lot of mainstream students kind of know each other, whereas I'm going into a situation I didn't know anyone. So anyway, I made it my business to go to every single session, which I thoroughly enjoyed. But one day in Pacific, the day that I felt like one of them was the day when I came back to my second year on the course, and it was Freshers Week. So it was crazy busy. So I did my warm-up as I normally would do by myself because it was just so busy. And then I went up to the trampoline and I just stood there and just waited for my turn. Eventually someone said to me, I said, Maylin, I didn't know they actually knew my name, but they said, it's your turn. I'm like, what, you're talking to me? So it kind of felt good that they started to talk to me. So anyway, I got on the trampoline and I got up there and I was just messing around, just bouncing up and down, just really enjoying being on the trampoline, just jumping up and down and doing a few moves, which I loved. But then I heard someone somewhere in the room saying, oh, I heard a pop in her knee. And then when I actually landed, I actually injured my knee. I was in a bad way during that time. But after that, someone shouted at me, Maylin, you big idiot. So I felt then I actually arrived. I felt I was accepted by everyone. Yeah.
And Maylin, what do you see for the future for third level education?
Well, firstly, for the next year, recently me and Eimear wrote an article for people with intellectual disabilities to be lecturers. So I recommend when it comes out, I recommend go read it. So it gives insights to people with intellectual disabilities and their insights to change, because the aim of the article is about creating more awareness and giving more opportunities for people with intellectual disabilities to be lecturers, as well as going into like opportunities for employment as well as for third level education. Thank you.
Oh, it's on. Okay, cool. Sorry, the light doesn't change from red to green, which I assumed is going to happen. Could I have the slide on the Africa Brain Health Network, please? So I'm part of the Africa Brain Health Network. I'm a co-founder along with Lingani and Mohammed, who you just saw, and a few other members as well. Thanks to the generous support of the Atlantic Institute, last year we were able to host a Brain Health Perspectives thematic convening in Johannesburg. And really, it was important for us that this was centered on the value system of the network. And I think Lingani expressed it a lot as well. But it was really important that what we do to support brain health is context-driven, and that we understand the priorities, the resources, the assets for health, and what's actually needed in different regions. So part of the Brain Health Perspectives convening, we actually used the arts in all its beautiful forms, really to create a process of learning and understanding difficult concepts, harmony in health. And yeah, so the program was, the arts were integrated into the program along the program. We used drawing to understand how we perceive resources within the African continent. This was from different fellows. We used movement to understand systems and how complex large systems, what happens to people on the periphery. The built environment was included as well. And with the built environment, we visited Constitution Hill in Johannesburg. Now, the Constitution Court is there, and it really has passed really remarkable judgments in the country with a vision of equity and justice. But it's also the site of a prison where Winnie Mandela, Nelson Mandela, and Mahatma Gandhi were imprisoned. And so we used that as a metaphor to understand how not to ignore this exceptionally violent and brutal history. But with this history, how do we build a system of healing? And what would a sort of constitutional court in a health system look like that supports justice, equity, and healing? So really practical initiatives to transform the way we're thinking about brain health in context. Music was included. You can see Bongiwe Lusizi and Pops Mohammed, both who actually, Bongiwe was here last year, and both actually use indigenous music instruments. So the Ohadi, Mbira, Kora. And again, really important for us to understand the resources. If we want to incorporate arts, what are the resources that we have? What are the instruments? How do we think about music? And they shared not just music, but also their stories around music. How was music actually used in our communities, or is still used in our communities to support women in childbirth? Various stories like that. In addition to the arts, we included artificial intelligence. Benjamin Rosman, who has a Pan-African AI community. And part of the work that they're doing is also to build large language models based on African languages and a Pan-African value system. So there's a lot that's actually happening across the continent. Foundational to all of this, and important for us as a network, individuals in the network, is to understand the traditional knowledge systems, indigenous knowledge systems, or traditional knowledge systems from immigrant communities to actually support brain health. So how do we actually support plural approaches with different knowledge systems and engage across these different systems with respect? And it's exceptionally challenging work, right? Just considering the way we think about knowledge is different, that we're working across, we're not yet across all 54 different countries, but there's 54 countries, over 1 billion people, multiple languages, multiple religions, multiple knowledge systems. And for this, we actually turned to leaders who've done this before. So we are inspired by leaders like Thomas Sankara. He was the president of Burkina Faso, and in less than 5 years as the president, he transformed a food insecure country to a country that had food surplus because he understood that he could. Leaders like Wangari Maathai, who with small, sure, practical, strategic steps developed this green movement that inspires people all over the world. And from South Africa, President Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela, who 30 years ago, on the 10th of May, was inaugurated as the first democratically elected president of South Africa. And in that moment, did the most remarkable of remarkable things. With this brutal history of apartheid, of colonization, of all the violence in this country, in that moment actually showed us how not to hate each other. How to actually look at our diversity, our friction, our disagreement and agreement as an opportunity for growth and transformation. And this is the value system that we center the work that we are doing. And these are the people that we are inspired by. Thank you.
And so last year at Creative Brain Week, Maylin and I hosted a session on brain health and dementia in people with Down syndrome. And this was under the theme of complex joy. And so it was really acknowledging the very high risk for dementia in people with Down syndrome, but more so looking forward and looking towards hope, and the hope toward in the future for whether it's modifiable risk factors or disease-modifying agents. But as Brian said, that session was really led by people with Down syndrome. So there were a number of different speakers, singers with Down syndrome, and a member of the audience was a fellow with the Health Equity Program in Takano in South Africa, Athol Kleinans. And after the session, Athol and I were speaking, and he was quite struck by the differences that he saw in terms of opportunities for people with Down syndrome in Ireland compared to South Africa. And so after our conversations, we decided to start a project in South Africa together with Dr. Juan Fotea in Barcelona to raise awareness of Down syndrome within South Africa. So the first step was for that was an Mbizo, which is a gathering of community stakeholders to look at a particular issue. So we held the Mbizo in November in Johannesburg, where there were members from the Department of Health in Gauteng, members from Intellectual Disability Services from Down Syndrome South Africa, academics working in the area, people with Down syndrome themselves and their families. And this was really to try to highlight what are the key needs and what are the key issues for the Down syndrome community in South Africa, and was really the first step. And Kirti facilitated that Mbizo. So the issues we looked at were across research, policy, and care. And one of the things that stood out, particularly in research, first was the lack of epidemiological evidence, but also that the majority of people with Down syndrome were seeing a traditional healing practitioner as part of their medical care. There are currently 200,000 traditional healers in South Africa compared to about 30,000 MDs. But we know quite little about how intellectual disability or Down syndrome, or indeed dementia or Alzheimer's disease, are conceptualized by traditional healing practitioners. And so we're starting a project to look at this where we want to develop a culturally appropriate framework and language that's at the interface of Indigenous and biomedical knowledge systems to facilitate interventions to support people with intellectual disability and also other neurocognitive disorders like Alzheimer's disease and dementia. But I think over the last year, beyond South Africa and beyond these projects, I think has really highlighted that we often talk about the inequities between people with Down syndrome and the general population, of which there are many. But there are also inequities within the Down syndrome population. So for example, in the States, we know there are racial inequities where Black people with Down syndrome are dying younger than white people with Down syndrome across nearly all age groups, but also inequities between the global North and the global South. So there's an estimated 6 million people with Down syndrome globally. About 700,000 of those are living either in the United States or in Europe, which the majority of funding and research is situated. Which means then that there's about 5.3 million people with Down syndrome outside of the United States and Europe, many of whom are in the global South, and that we know a lot less about their health needs and their health trajectories. And so over the next while, with GBHI and the Atlantic Institute and the network of fellows, we hope to develop a research network within the Global South to help us to better understand what the needs are for the Down syndrome community in the Global South.
And so it begins. I would like to thank you all for sharing work in progress and for introducing you to the range and breadth of conversations that go on in this room over the next 3 days. A huge thanks to Kirti, Eimear, Mei-Lin, Rachel, and Anusha. Thank you.